right now, analysts are very much concluding that he decided, with a choice between saving the party and saving the nation, he decided to save the party.
Angola's elections are over, but the result is being contested. Joining us to provide some context is Paula Cristina Roque. She is an independent analyst and author based in Lisbon, Portugal. Paula Cristina Roque, thank you for joining us on the show. We are recording on Wednesday, and this is a developing story. So there may be some details that materialize by the time this video releases. But what is the current context in Angola at the moment in the wake of these elections, which are now being contested?
So these were the fifth elections in the country. And they were the first elections in 30 years that the opposition UNITA stood a real chance of winning. There are credible reports that, in fact, they did win these polls, and that there were several irregularities that have been replicated over the several election cycles. So since 1992, that the MPLA party has completely controlled the machinery of the state, of the public media, of the Electoral Commission. So all the organs that would be of the courts, in fact. So all the organs that are important to ensure that any election is credible and free, fair, and transparent. So political instability, it could happen at two levels, between the different parties, but also within the MPLA. Because the MPLA has been losing support, in fact, 10% each election cycle. So in 2008, they won 81%, in 2012, 71%, in 2017, 61%, and now 51%, which also begs the question, how is this statistically and mathematically possible that they go down precisely every 10 percentage points? So the MPLA has several fractures within the party. João Lourenço divided the party by going after his predecessor, and several of the generals that helped his predecessor, President José Eduardo dos Santos, capture the economy of the country and really loot the state. But that means that with such a poor result, and if in fact the opposition shows that they won these polls, João Lourenço will be even more threatened from within, never mind threatened from without.
Okay, so there's this wafer-thin margin of victory. UNITA is now challenging those results. Do you think that they have a high prospect of overturning those results, or do you think that there is a high degree of institutional capture that they're up against? How independent, for example, are the courts in adjudicating something like that?
So the courts are really almost an extension of the MPLA party. All the judges are appointed by the president. They were instrumentalized in the run-up to the elections to deconstruct the opposition, and they were used as an instrument to attack UNITA specifically. So the courts are not reliable. The Constitutional Court, which is the last resort that within the legal order that UNITA can apply for to overturn these elections, has in the past completely disregarded. So either UNITA takes a political decision to go internationally and request some sort of international mediation. As far as we know, the State Department, so in the US government and the EU, have not recognized João Lourenço as the elected president. They are on the sidelines waiting to see how this dispute unravels. So internally, the other way that the opposition could find some sort of point of leverage is to take the millions of supporters that it has in Luanda, in the capital, to the streets. Now, the MPLA only won 700,000 votes in the capital out of an electorate of 4.5 million. So UNITA won the vast great majority of those votes in the capital that the government has recognized as well. So if it were to take to the streets, we would see, well, the pressure that the MPLA has been trying to avoid as a securitized state that fears instability and fears the people and the rising of the people. I mean, an Angolan spring has been something that has terrorized the imagination and the psychosis of the presidency and the security elites since 2011.
Right, and now the former president, Dos Santos, he has actually passed away and leaves quite a troubled legacy. What do you think is the remnants of this vast network of patronage and corruption that he created? You mentioned the securitization of the Angolan state. What does he leave behind?
So he left a very difficult legacy. He was known as the architect of peace because he brought peace by waging war. And the country's been in peace since 2002. But there were no peace dividends for the population. While there was an oil boom that reached its peak of double-digit growth in 2008, the vast majority of Angolans live below the poverty line. So what happened was a level of decay and inequality. So under this current president, in the last 4 or 5 years, that poverty has become accentuated and it is spread. It is spread to the cities. It's not just the rural areas. The south of the country is facing a famine. So there's a sense that the MPLA has not governed in the best interests of the nation. So that was one of the legacies. Another legacy was the securitization of the state, which meant that everything was deemed as an element of national security. So the security forces were very much positioned as to ensure the longevity, the political longevity of the MPLA. They were there to guard the political project, not there to ensure public order or to protect the state. Another issue, like you mentioned, was corruption and a vast network, a kleptocratic network of patronage. Now, this has made João Lourenço's anti-corruption fight, it has burdened it in one way, because to deconstruct that network, you would have to deconstruct the MPLA party as a whole, because that's in what keeps a lot of those elites linked together and not factionalized. So when João Lourenço began his anti-corruption drive, he needed to protect a few of those people and target others. And so right now, analysts are very much concluding that he decided, with a choice between saving the party and saving the nation, he decided to save the party.
Oh, that sounds very familiar. So what does this suggest about the state of liberation movements in Southern Africa? They have a tendency to hold on to power for a very long time. And this question of succession becomes very, very contentious. Do you think that we are seeing the beginnings of change sweeping across the southern part of Africa? Many of these liberation movements are still in power, but their power is looking increasingly tenuous.
Well, I hope that Southern Africa would go against the current pattern that we're seeing across the world. The world is becoming more authoritarian. Only about 20% of the population globally lives in democracies. So, and yet we're starting to see some opposition parties taking power, the last one being Zambia. So we are seeing a level of frustration, a level of political disillusionment that the population has had, even within the ruling parties themselves. They've become complicit. They've become almost too self-confident that their liberation credentials would hold up any legitimacy and credibility they require to govern without having to do the hard work of governing itself. And so we've seen many of the structural pathologies of governance we've seen, for example, people using the state to their own benefit, not empowering the state, not empowering institutions. We saw a country, for example, like South Africa, that began in 1994 an incredibly powerful constitution and several institutions of the state that were robust. Slowly over the years, they have been eroded from within. And that has been the case in many other countries as well, that began on a much weaker footing than South Africa. But unlike South Africa, that has a relatively weak opposition, Angola has a very strong opposition right now. And it's got a strong opposition that has won the cities. And so in this case, the most educated elites and the most urban of the population is very much in favor of political change and political shifts. So we need to see what this entails, but also once the opposition takes over, for example, if the opposition does take over in Angola, the next 5 years are going to be very difficult. For whoever governs in Angola, because of the socioeconomic crisis in the country and the many reforms within the state and the economy and the political economy of the country that need to be done not in a sequential way, but actually at the same time.
Paula Cristina Roque, thank you very much for joining us on the CRA. Let's hand over to you, our audience. Do you think that liberation movements are losing their grip on power in Southern Africa? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.